Hi everyone, my name is José Luis Méndez Montesoca. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the Institute of Physics and Mathematics in the Universidad Michoacana de San Nicolás de Hidalgo in Mexico. And this is some of our recent work, which is called Thermal Detection of Phase Transitions of Pluronic F-127 hydrogels upon concentration and temperature using the thermal wave resonant cavity technique. And oh, well, the Pluronic F-127 hydrogels are made of polymeric amphiphilic molecules, which at low concentrations remain as monomers in solution in water, and as the concentration is increased, it start to form micelles as a configuration of low energy. And if the temperature is increased, that micelles start to entangle to form a rigid gel. This is the molecular structure of the pluronic. And well, this transition usually is observed by changes in the density or in the viscosity of the solutions. But from a thermal point of view, is difficult to observe. It can be used calorimetry, but the heat capacity changes when the formation of micelles occurs, but it remain almost constant during the gelling process. So in this work, we observed these transitions using the thermal wave resonant cavity technique, which enable us to obtain the thermal diffusivity of the samples. And this is the experimental setup of this technique, which consists in a lacking amplifier, where a sinusoidal signal is generated called the reference signal, and this signal is sent to a laser driver to control the current for a laser diode, obtaining a laser light source with a given frequency and with a sinusoidal form. And that signal is, well, that light is sent to a silicon wafer, which acts as a thermal wave generator by the photothermal effect. And the silicon wafer can be immersed into the liquid samples using a stepper motor. At the bottom of the liquid sample, a pyroelectric sensor is placed to obtain the information of the thermal waves as current information, as electrical signal. And the signal is sent to an impedance coupler and then to a preamplifier, and then is sending back to the locking amplifier, which make an operation between the measured signal and the um, reference signal to avoid the noise and obtain a clean signal. With this method, voltage signal is obtained with an amplitude R and frequency W and phase phi. Then this voltage signal can be related with the solution of the heat diffusivity equation in one dimension. Well, if our experimental array is well aligned and axial symmetric, it can be used the solution of this equation in one dimension only. And in the thermalytic regime, it can be simplified to this form of exponentials with with a function dependent of the frequency. And it can be related the real part and the imaginary part of these equations. And it can be plotted, for example, the logarithm of the amplitude versus the depth of the sample L, or can be plotted the phase of the signal versus the depth of the sample L, and from the slope of these curves it can be obtained the thermal diffusivity of the sample. And using this technique, the thermal diffusivity of some samples with different concentration was obtained at a fixed temperature of 40 degrees Celsius. Here, the transition from solution to soft gel is depicted as the dotted blue line, and the transition from soft gel to rigid gel is depicted as the red dashed line, and it is observed changes in the slope of the thermal diffusivity curve in these transitions. Then, even from these early results, it can be observed that the transition can be detected with this method. We conducted another experiment with a fixed concentration of 13 weight percent of pluronic in DI water and upon different temperatures. And the transition from solution to soft gel is depicted as this blue dotted line, and it is also observed a change in the slope of the curve. Well, once the thermal diffusivity was obtained, it was calculated the thermal conductivity of the samples by its definition of the product of the thermal diffusivity, the density, and the heat capacity. But in this case, the law of mixtures was used in terms of the volume fraction phi, defined as the volume of the polymer with respect to the whole volume of the system. And well, the thermal conductivity can be used to analyze our data with effective thermal models, which are usually written in terms of the thermal conductivity, as the thermal conductivity is an intrinsic property of the materials. So we used the Lewis-Nielsen model made for composites, thinking as, for example, matrix filled with particles. In this case, our matrix is water, and the particles are the spherical micelles or the monomers. And here, this parameter A is the shape, is the form factor, which take into account the shape of the filler. In this case, we regarded the micelles as spherical, and this parameter U is a ratio between the thermal conductivity of the pure polymer Kp and the thermal conductivity of the matrix, in this case water, so is the thermal conductivity of water, Kw, and this phi max is the maximum packing fraction that can be obtained with the geometry of the fillers. And this is another model that we used, the Shu-Kai-Liu model for hydrogels, which is quite different. It takes into account that hydrogel as a sphere filled with water and with an interface in between. Here we have the Kp as the thermal conductivity of the pure polymer, Kh as the thermal conductivity of the hydrogel, and Kw prime as the thermal conductivity of the interface. And this is the main equation of that model. In here we have the fit of our experimental data with the models. It can be observed that the Lewis-Nielsen model fit better for higher concentrations, is this line in blue, but fails for lower concentrations, and the Shu model in red, as the red line, fit well for low concentration, but fails for higher concentrations. We regard that this is due to the nature of the formulation of these models. So we are currently working in modifications of the Shu model to have a complete description of these transitions using some of the parameters found with the Nielsen model. And in the correct interpretation of the thermal diffusivity and conductivity of the experiment made upon temperature. And as conclusions, well, we consider that the thermal wave resonant cavity technique used is able to observe the transitions of the pluronic of this hydrogel upon temperature and concentration, but the effective thermal mathematical models are needed for a better description of these transitions. And well, if you want more information, if you need more information in this topic, here is my email and the website of our institute. And I really thank you for your time and attention.